Hello, I'm Travis Mills, and I make westerns.
Welcome to our first episode, and we have quite a special guest, Jeff Dawn. You may have not heard his name, but you've certainly seen it in the credits of many films that you've seen, including Terminator, Terminator 2, Predator, The 13th Warrior. The list goes on and on. I had the honor last year in October and November to work with Jeff on Terror on the Prairie, a new western. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about his own legacy and the legacy of his family. So without further ado, here is Jeff Dawn.
Hello, Travis. Thank you very much. What an honor to be the first person that's on this podcast. With all the people that you've known and worked with and worked for you, all the powerful actors and producers and talent out there, I am very honored.
Well, thank you for doing this. Our experience talking together on set, you were one of the first people that came to mind, certainly. And I'm very, very grateful that you would do this. So I want to start by talking about your long legacy, the family legacy in the movie business, right? Because that's something that's unique about you, is that your whole family, or many members of your family, have been involved in Hollywood for years, starting with your grandfather, Jack Dawn. And you had mentioned to me that he'd worked on The Wizard of Oz, but I started looking into more of his films, and he was a makeup artist on some of my favorites, so I wanted to name a few. John Ford's They Were Expendable, Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland, a bunch of westerns including The Devil's Doorway, Annie Got Your Gun, The Big Trail with John Wayne. So what can you tell me about Jack Dawn, your grandfather and the first makeup artist in the family?
Well, unfortunately, Jack died before I was born, so I don't remember him. But of course, I know of all the stories. You know, there's a legacy there that you certainly learn when you're being raised by a father who is a makeup artist, and his father, Jack Dawn, was a makeup artist. What I've learned about Jack is that he was an artist and a cowboy in Kentucky. He was a good old boy, but he was very good with his art. He could sculpt and draw and paint, and he was very good. And he came out to Hollywood with his horse and started working on silent films as an extra. And he would come along with his horse, and they found that he could be anything. Oh, you want a Native American Indian? Okay, he would come with long hair and paint himself up to look like a Native American. You want somebody from India? You want a miner with a big beard? Whatever you want, he would create himself into this and show up. And suddenly all the producers and directors and cast started looking at this, and this was in the early days when there weren't many makeup artists at studios. You had actors and actresses doing their own makeup. So Jack would help the other actors as an extra do their makeup and create these various characters, and people noticed, and he just moved right up through the ranks. He ended up running the makeup department at MGM Studios for a total of 15 or 20 years. Did over 100 films, responsible for them, including Wizard of Oz. So, and then my father came along. He was a World War II fighter pilot, P-38 fighter pilot, very decorated. He came back, and suddenly he was, the war hero working for his dad, sweeping floors, because that's how you started back then. You start off as, with like an intern. And I remember he told me a story. He said that his dad called him in because he was late. And he said, "Bob, I'm going to send you home." "Why? I'm just late for a few minutes." He goes, "I know. Can't have that here. I don't care if you're my son." He said, "I'm sending you home today. If you're late again, I'm going to send you home for a week. And if you're late a third time, you're not coming back." That's tough love. It's not the way, that's not the way I raise my kids, but that's always in the back of my head of, okay, you got to sometimes, as a parent, you got to be a little brutal at times, and it's easy to spoil your children and to tell them how proud you are and how much you love them. It's really tough to tell them no. It's really tough to teach them the brutality of the life that's ahead of them. So that was my grandfather. He passed away, like I said, a few years before I was born. And I have books and clippings and newspaper things, because this was back in the heyday of Hollywood. Everyone showed up with a suit and a tie. You were a mini celebrity just by the hanging out around the celebrities and being head of that department. So yeah, that's always been out there, and I'm very proud of it. And I hope he's watching and saying, "Good job, Jeff."
Well, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. So, you mentioned that there was a time when most of the actors were doing their own makeup, right? Which reminds me of my own films because sometimes that's been the case with some of my smaller budget films.
Of course.
But
I've seen so many of your photos. They look fantastic. Whatever makeup you guys are doing, that's, you're humbling me.
well, yeah, well, thank you. We've had some good makeup artists, but sometimes, we've had to do it ourselves. Do you know when the industry started shifting and makeup started being a bigger, I guess, priority for the studio productions? Do you know about that history by chance?
That's a good question, and I should know that. Me of all people should know that. But I would have to go back and I would look at when all the studios, the Fox and the Paramount and MGM, Warner Brothers, all of those started having their own makeup department with their director of makeup. Was it, in 1915? Was it in because I think that's the year that my grandfather started at MGM Studios. So it was probably about that time, I'm guessing. Before that, not so much. After that, each studio said, well, this is what we need to do. If we have an old age makeup and we're putting $1 million into this film with these big actors, we have to be guaranteed that it's going to be the best possible. And not just hope, because if you have somebody like a Lon Chaney was fantastic with his own makeup. There are a few actors and actresses that were quite good with their own makeup, but for the most part, when it came to advanced makeups, you had to go with a professional.
Right. Well, that was around the time that feature film started to be a big deal with Birth of a Nation and then onward. So you're probably right about that being the kickoff of makeup departments. Let's talk a little bit more about your dad, because I was looking at his resume too. Again, amazing. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and Marnie, John Frankenheimer's Black Sunday, John Carpenter's Christine, I guess was his last film. It was dedicated to him. And then in terms of westerns, Wichita with Joel McCrea, which is one of the best Wyatt Earp movies in my opinion, and The Missouri Breaks. Now we talked about The Missouri Breaks because it was also shot in Montana, and we were in Montana. You remembered the filming location and you visited it again, correct?
Correct. Yes, I was 16 years old when my father did it in the mid-'70s, and I had very vivid memories of it. It was with Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson, a couple of rather infamous names now, and they were perfectly nice to me. I was this kid. I was the son of the makeup artist, and typically actors and actresses like the makeup and hair people because we're in their space. We're touching their face. We see them at the best and the worst in the morning. We hear their stories. There is a trust that you have to convey to them that you're not going to be sharing this information. It's like the hairdresser, the barber, that you're going to tell them everything. So actors and actresses typically treat makeup and hair people quite well. There are exceptions, but that's typically the case. And I went up there and I just had a blast. I stayed with my dad for about a week. We were in Virginia City out of Ennis, Montana, a very, very small, extremely historic town. And the town was, because it was on the historic registry, they couldn't touch it. And back then, the rooms were still filled with furniture and clothing and things like they walked away from this town in the 1800s. And since then, dozens of films and TV projects have been filmed there because it's so authentic. It's not a movie ranch that has facades that are fake on the backside. These are full-on log cabins with full-on furniture and working fireplaces and everything. So it was fun to go back there and see that.
I bet. Yeah. I was able to visit it with our costume designer for Terror on the Prairie. She was working there. So me and Michael Polish, the director of the film, we went once. It was very cool. It reminded me a lot of Tombstone. I don't know if you've been to Tombstone.
I have, yes.
Very similar. What did you learn most from your dad growing up and seeing him work in the business?
That's a good question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that before, but it's good because, all right, how much do you learn from a professional level that you use every day, and how much do you learn from a personality, an emotion, how to handle situations, how to work with people from your father or both your parents? And I have to say he helped me a great, great deal. My father was very respected in the business. He was excellent with beauty as well as special effects makeup. He was known for his special effects. He won an Emmy for Mission Impossible, the series that he did for many years. And he did a lot of big makeup effects films. So I was fortunate to learn that from him. I learned something as simple as when he was training me in the garage in Napa, California, after he was semi-retired, and I was living up there and learning from him. He would say, okay, how much longer for that beard? And I'd say, 20 minutes. And he'd say, now, be sure to give me an accurate estimate, because you're going to have assistant directors and production assistants asking you throughout your career, and you don't want to get a reputation of not getting these times right. So if it's going to be 30 minutes, let me know. If you can do it in 15 minutes, let me know, but you've got to stick to that. So little things like that. He was so easygoing and liked by so many people. I know that I can be that person as well as be a little bit harder and tougher on my crew at times. But not as tough as his dad was on him, clearly. But, as a department head, I've only pretty much been the department head. The department head hires a crew. You end up making up some of the crew, some of the cast, depending on how much time you have. You're responsible for the budget, for the design, for a lot of things. So I haven't worked for people so much. I've always been the boss, and you've got to really, figure out how to communicate, how to be strong yet supportive, how to give support to your crew, and how to let them know it's not cool. And the biggest thing that I try to tell people when I lecture about department heading is a typical scenario is you walk out on the set with an actor and actress that has a particular look, a makeup. It can be wounds, age, beauty, whatever. And the director looks at that person and goes, fantastic, Jeff. That looks fantastic. Well, if I didn't do the makeup, I want to have the makeup artist there so that I can say, thanks, Bob. It was Mary right here that actually did the makeup. So you're not only thanking Mary, but you're thanking her publicly in front of the director, in front of other crew members. You're not just, hey, director, she did it, but don't tell anybody. And at the end of the day, who's going to, you're going to get hired again because of the overall look of the film, how you handled the show. You're not going to, that doesn't take anything away from me that another makeup artist has done a fantastic job, possibly better than I could even do, because it only reflects positively on me at the end.
That's fantastic
So things
advice.
like that my dad taught me.
Yeah, that's great. I think I really like what you said about the timing thing, because I know myself as a director, when I ask a makeup artist, how long is it going to take? I want the truth, right? If they tell me 10 minutes and they know it's going to take 20, that ends up being very frustrating, because it's how am I going to use that time that I'm waiting for them to be done? You know what I'm saying? So that's a great lesson that he taught you.
Yeah, the difference could be if I say 10 minutes, you're going to wait, and so is the whole company. If I say 30 minutes, hey, we can get this insert, or we can turn the camera and get that shot.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about your process as a department head, because I think that's something that a lot of people just don't understand. That, like a lot of the industry, that they're not exposed to all of this information. First, though, I do want to talk about one more member of your family who's part of this incredible makeup legacy, and that's your uncle, Wes. Again, the credits are outstanding. Some of my favorites: A Boy and His Dog, Carrie, Urban Cowboy, Red Dawn with the great John Milius, Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, 2 McTiernan movies. And then, of course, you worked together on Flight of the Intruder, which I just watched again the other night. So what was that like? How did you guys end up working together? What was he like? And what are some lasting impressions of Wes?
My Uncle Wes was definitely the most liked, most easygoing, most helpful human being in our family. I mean, he always had somebody living at his house that he was helping. And, and it might have been an extra. Wes passed away of asthma at 51 years old in 1983, which was very unfortunate. I was visiting him at the time and actually found him. But it surprised me, because you're not supposed to die at 51 years old, And Wes, I had so many people over the next few years come up to me with tears in their eyes many times. there was a little person that was an extra and a photo double for a kid on a film that he did many years ago. And he worked with me. And he said, Jeff, I worked with your father. And I got to tell you something. Your father drove me back and forth to work every day for a long time because I didn't have a car. Or Wes did. And he took care of me for all of these times, and he never told anybody about it. I stayed at his place at times, and I've heard that kind of story over and over about Wes. And, am I capable of that? Absolutely. I love to help people like that, but Wes was a magnet for that. He would just have these fallen souls show up, and he was married, and, he had a couple of grown daughters, and he had his own career, and he had his interest. He was a race car driver, and he loved doing that. But he always found time to help people. And so that is something that's really helped me quite a bit. When my dad passed away early on, and I wasn't in the union yet, Wes started hiring me. He started finding ways, because I was into special effects makeup. Back in the 80s, there weren't that many makeup artists that could do prosthetics. I could, because my father taught me. So Wes was able to get me on all these different projects, onto, what was it, Let's Get Harry in Mexico, several films. And I got my union days on this. And when I finally passed my union test, Wes came to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, Jeff, your dad was staying at my house working on Christine when he passed away, and he told me, if anything happens to me, I really need you to promise me you're going to help Jeff. The kid's got some talent, he's hungry to do this, but it's hard getting in the union. And he's like, of course, Bob. Well, nothing's going to happen to you. It'll be fine. You'll be there to help him. Well, my dad passed away not long after that, and Wes then told me this, like I said, with tears in his eyes. So Wes was extremely supportive and helpful for me to get my foot in the door. I mean, I'd already done films like Terminator 1 and To Live and Die in L.A. and Teen Wolf and some other things, but I wasn't in the union yet. So Wes was very instrumental in helping me do that. So that's why in my speech, winning the Academy Award, I said I'd like to give special thanks to the two people most responsible for me being up here, Bob and Wes Dawn, the late Bob and Wes Dawn. Well, you're not supposed to thank people that are, but who gives a shit? There's a billion people watching right then. This was a gut feeling that I didn't want to thank anybody else. We had Stan Winston, who I'm also very thankful for, who won the Academy Award at the same time. So he thanked James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger and his crew and even my crew. I really needed to thank my uncle and my father, because they're the ones that got me through the door.
I watched that speech the other day, and I loved that. I loved that it was so short and sweet, genuine, sincere. You could tell that, those were the two people for you. So thank you for sharing those memories about Wes and your dad. I really appreciate it. What do you think it is that has attracted the four of you to makeup? You talked about Jack being an artist and a sculptor, and obviously you're influenced by what your parents do, but this feels like so much more than just taking the job of your father. It feels like there's something really in you guys that's leading you towards this makeup creation.
Yeah, that's also a good question, because there is nepotism here, of course. I thought nepotism was going to get me through the door easily. It goes back to when I was living in Napa. I was working, doing construction, and my history is building, cabinetry, finished carpentry. I still do a lot of that. It's a huge passion to me, is to build and fix stuff. And I was living up there, and I thought, I think I want to be a makeup artist. I'd helped my father for years on and off in the lab. His lab was always the garage. We would have actors come in and do life casts and the sculpting and the mold making and all of that. I was very involved with being a lab guy for years with my father. But my father always used to say, you don't want to do this. Get your engineering degree. Get your, be a pilot like he was. Do whatever you want to do. Don't get in the film business. And I never spoke deeply with him about it, but I'm sure it was because he knew how brutal the business could be. It's very tough on the family. You know, I tell people that I make about the same money as the gardener, not the gardener, but the plumber or the auto mechanic that I hire. The difference is they work 8 hours and I work, you know, when I was on Hawaii Five-0 for 10 years, I averaged through my Social Security 84 hours a week. That's the kind of hours you put in as a makeup department head. It's brutal. And needless to say, the family and your friends and yourself, they suffer. But I mean, it's a wonderful career. The travel, the lives that you lead and live, the people you get to know, the money that you can make. So it's a tough one to say, all right, I'm going to do less of this and spend more time with my friends and family. And my father knew that this is not a good thing for me to have to figure out. Just keep me out of the business, get into something else, and and have that life. So I never thought of it seriously. When I finally decided I wanted to do it, I went to my Uncle Wes, and he said, yeah, I'll help you. I told him, he knew all about it. He goes, let's just see if you're right for it. So I worked with him on and off shows, just watching and helping, learning makeup. And finally, I was scared to death, and I went to my dad, and I said, Dad, I have thought about this a great deal. I have studied. I have worked at it for the last 6 months. Wes has helped me. They really, really want to be a makeup artist like you and like your father. And he, without hesitation, went, fantastic. I'll help you. Because he wanted me to make my mind up, And I was like, wow, that would surprise me. But he wanted me to make my mind up so that it was not just something I stepped into, that I had to have a passion for it. I had to have the knowledge of how brutal it could be with the hours and being away from friends and family, that I was willing to, on my own terms, make those choices. And he was extremely supportive from that time on. So he was very helpful with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure he could see your passion. We'll have to talk about it. I don't feel like your passion has waned at all over the years. Maybe that'll be the last question. How do you hang on to that passion over the years?
Oh, yeah.
So you talked a little bit about how you got into the business. You learned prosthetics, right? And you started working on these films, and Wes and your dad were helping you out. We'll talk about your first big projects, but first of all, I want to get back to the craft a little bit. You talked about being a makeup department head. Who all is on the makeup team, first of all? And what do you look for when you hire those people?
Typically what happens is a film will reach out to me in the way of a producer that I've worked with, a production manager that I've worked with, an actor I've worked with, or a director. These are the people that have the power. And although I have a strong resume now, you don't get hired off your resume still, because when you're in a position to say, I want this person for makeup department head, or for head of special effects, or wardrobe designer, you're in the position to fail if they fail. If you're the unit production manager that says, I love using this person, and they succeed, then you look good. If they fail, you don't look so good. So you have to have a history with these more powerful people to get the job in the first place. Of course, when I worked with Arnold, it was just automatic. People knew that I was going to be the makeup department head on the show. And even then, it was a battle at times, because they'd say, well, no, you'll do Arnold, and we want somebody else to be the makeup department head. And I had to fight this battle many times, because most, not all, but most makeup and hair people that work with stars only work with them. From day one, whether it was The Rock or Arnold or whoever, I would say, this is how I do this. I run the show. I am busy with the show. You're always my first priority, but there will be times that I have to step away because I have something big coming up. I have to do a test, or I have to coordinate something, or I have to oversee something. So I won't always be here with you. And not a lot of actors can handle that. But that was my, if they didn't work with them, I wouldn't have worked with them again. Because department heading is so much bigger and more fulfilling to me than just taking care of an actor. If it's a Terminator 2 or 3 or something like that, then your main actor is very time consuming, because you've got hours a day of prosthetics on them. But most films that I do with actors that I brought in with that actor, they represent 5 or 10% of my responsibility. It's the overall picture that is so important. Keeping the director happy, keeping production happy with the cost of everything and time, because time is money, big time in the film business. And as makeup artists, we have the ability to really screw with camera. If they say camera ready at 7 a.m., you better have all your actors there at 7 a.m. Because if the crew is waiting of 100 people for 30 minutes because you didn't have your act together, you have wasted tens of thousands of dollars and possibly not getting your day's work done. So it's a big responsibility that way because you have the say of what's on camera as well as the cost. And also, I've had directors come to me and say, Jeff, let me know how the actors are doing, okay? They basically want you to spy, which I go, look at, I'll tell you when things are good, I'm not going to tell you when things are bad, you know? I'll give you positive feedback on happy, good things, but you're never going to hear me go, oh boy, Bob or Mary or whoever is in a really shitty mood today. Stay away from them. That's not my job, to be a spy. It is our responsibility to make sure the cast is not only ready on time, looks right, but also steps out of the trailer feeling happy, positive, and confident. You know, not beaten down and with all kinds of rumors and things stuck in their head. I'm completely against rumors, and I shut them down in the trailer every time I hear one. I will literally stop somebody and go, excuse me, were you there for that? No, I wasn't, but I heard. No. Let's not talk about that here. I wouldn't want somebody saying that about me because they heard something from somebody else, you know. I always say that rumors, I talk about this a lot, because rumors are very rampant in the film business, especially in the makeup and hair department. A rumor is only continued if it's fueled. If somebody is seen having coffee on a Saturday at a Starbucks, a man and a woman, that's nothing. They have to tell somebody, yeah, I saw them there and they seem to be into each other. And then the next person that hears that has to say, yeah, I heard that they were stepping out of, I think, a restaurant or a bar. And then the next person says, yeah, it was like it closing with a bar and they were all over each other. That's how rumors have to be continually fueled. So the key is to shut them down on day one, nip it in the bud, you know. So that's part of a department head. The schedules, the timing. I may say to a first assistant director, you know, if we shoot this a different way than it's scheduled, you're going to save 30 minutes of makeup time. I do this all the time. And they'll say, oh, great, I see what you mean. Thank you. Yeah, we'll do that. That way we're only waiting 20 minutes instead of 45 minutes or so for a makeup or hair change. So it's my responsibility to make it as efficient as possible, like a first AD. And I always tell ADs, I say, you know, I'm basically an AD that's pretending to be a makeup artist because I have my own walkie-talkies. Assistant directors don't like makeup and hair people to have walkie-talkies because they're worried that that walkie-talkie will be open, meaning turned on, in the makeup trailer, sitting there on the counter, and the first assistant director will go, where the hell is that actor? Get their ass out here now. I'm tired of waiting for him. And then the actor hears that. Ooh, bad news for the first assistant director. So I have to tell them, look, it's a headset. Nobody ever has an open walkie in the trailer. I guarantee you the protocols and the training I'm giving my crew, this will never happen. So it's important to listen to that. I heard that Bruce Willis, I know that Bruce Willis has in his contract that he gets a walkie-talkie that he keeps in his trailer. You think that scares some of the assistant directors? It's like, shit, Bruce is listening to every word we say. So,
I love it.
yeah, the design, the working with the dollars, the timing, keeping your actors happy, the continuity. You know, you have a big cut on somebody's head, we do a scene, and then we go to the next scene that's shot, you know, that's cut together an hour before the guy gets a cut. You've got to be able to take it off. You've got to be able to match the continuity on hair, on sweat, on everything, so that when they cut it together, they don't go, we got to reshoot this. This person has, you know, I remember watching Lord of the Rings, and there's a scene where all the makeups are on the wrong side. A real quick scene. Well, I know what happens with that. That's happened with me before. They don't get the right coverage. So it's happened on Hawaii Five-0. It happens on that. It's happened on many films of mine where suddenly you look and you have the wounds on the wrong side, or a headset that the actor has is now on the other side. And you know that they didn't get the right camera angle. They wanted it from the right. They didn't get it. So now they flip the negative, so to speak. They do this digitally now, but in the old days, they would flip the negative. and now they have the correct angle going from the left. Well, it changes everything, and it makes the makeup people look like idiots. This happens all the time still, you know.
It's very true. Very true. So you hire obviously the additional makeup artist. I assume that you have input into the hairstylist as well and special effects makeup, or is that completely separate?
Yes and no. In the old days, the old school was the makeup department head also did special effects makeup, like my father, and I certainly have done my share of it. Now, because of time, because of cost, because of the intricacy and the timing and such, we hire out to makeup effects labs. And I'll even bring in makeup specialists that are experts at airbrushing or hair work or, you know, prosthetics or whatever, fantasy. And although I've done it all and love to do it, I just have to coordinate that because I only have so much chair time in the makeup trailer. But yes, I oftentimes hire the hairdresser. A few years back, it was the makeup department head, and then that person, man or woman, would hire the hairdresser, and it was called the head hairstylist. Then they upgraded head hairstylist to hair department heads. But it's still a lot of times I end up hiring. It's rare. I've maybe been hired once or twice by a hairstylist, and I've probably hired 30, 35 hairstylists myself. And then makeup effects labs many times, you know, sometimes like on Terror on the Prairie. Dallas, our executive producer, already had a long history with Tate, our very talented makeup effects guy out of Oklahoma. And he's perfect for the job. He already has history with them. He gives them what they want. So I just coordinated with Tate all the time, because that's what I'm used to doing. Hey, we've got that makeup coming up next Wednesday. Let's do a test on Tuesday. Let's do a dry run through. What do you need from me? How can I help you? You know, so I just continue doing that with Tate and his crew. And I'm sure that's the way it'll be on other films, but many times it's just coordinating with the studio. It might be Stan Winston's studio. It might be, there's so many big studios out there, but it's still me with the emails and the phone calls and all that. Hey, we just had a change in schedule. We now need to do that test here. I need 5 more prosthetics. You know, you're coordinating with those effects people.
That makes sense. A lot of the makeup artists that I work with are just getting their start, right? These are people that have done a few films, maybe no films, right? Maybe they've only done beauty makeup, and I'm throwing them totally under the bus and saying you got to do wounds and all this stuff, and they're watching YouTube videos. For someone like that, and there's a good chance that they're part of our audience for this podcast, what's some of your advice for getting involved in the industry, and just the most important things for them to kind of approach the business with?
I'm asked this all the time. I do, like I mentioned, I do a lot of lecturing on department heading. I have whole sections on how to get in the business, how to work, how to get a job, how to keep a job, how not to get fired from a job, who to contact, you know, social media. You know, the old days it was you'd send your resume out and you'd send cover letters, and then you would send out your book photos. Then you'd send out a CD or a small, you know, mini digital version of it. Now, of course, everything's online. Very important for people getting started to have an online presence. I've had several people that have approached me at different trade shows and such. Jeff, is there any way I can intern, or any way that I can be a production assistant or something for you? And this, I've done this many times in the past. Typically the studio's happy, the production is happy, because they only have to pay for insurance for them, a few dollars a day. If they trip stepping out of a makeup trailer, they're not going to sue. You know, you have to have workman's comp, and they get free meals. So it's worked out well that way. But I need to have a place for that person in the trailer. I don't want to say, okay, we're all crowded up now. You who are giving 10 hours a day for free, I want you to go stand out in the 100-degree weather outside the trailer because there's no room for you in here. I need to have a spot for their own dignity and their own, you know, so I don't have to worry about them all the time when I don't have a project for them. I can't just say, go away and come back in an hour. So I've helped people that way. Get out there and hit the street. You want to go to the makeup effects studios. You want to go to the makeup places like Navy's Beauty Supply, Friends Beauty Supply, Cinema Secrets. These are the 3 big makeup stores in Los Angeles that are filled with people like myself that can hire. Get your face in front of it. Something as simple as when you hand a card out or you send a resume out, have a little snapshot of your face in the top right corner or top left corner, so that there's a little bit of a, if I meet somebody at a trade show and they hand me one of 30 cards I'm going to get that day, I have no idea who that person was. If I look, oh yeah, that guy, I remember bumping into him at the lunch line. It gives you a little bit more attachment to that person. So I suggest that. Be the squeaky wheel. I'm a big believer of be a squeaky wheel. And people call me and text me and email me all the time. Jeff, I'm looking for work. What do you suggest? And I always return phone calls. I always return emails. And what I give them the suggestion is, if you're contacting me like this, you should be doing it with a dozen more big name people in Hollywood. And most people won't be as responsive, but one thing I suggest is that when you say, let's say that you're talking to me, you want to work for me, you're an up-and-coming makeup artist, and you can sense that I'm just like, this is wasting my time. You can say, look at Jeff, how about, I understand you don't have anything now, that's fantastic, I appreciate your time. Are you okay if I reach out to you again in 3 months? Well, 9 out of 10 of these makeup artists are going to go, oh, absolutely, great, yeah, just to get you off the phone. But then when you contact them again in 3 months, you can say, hey, Jeff, remember when we talked last, you said it was okay I contact you again in 3 months. So you keep the door open and you don't piss the person off, and that's what's so important. There's so many people that have been at the right time and place where I've been able to hire them. It's like, oh, yeah, actually, I do need to hire somebody on this show. And I am coming to your town. And I would love to hire you, or I'd love to see your book, or I'd love to meet with you. So you want to be very, very active. Sending out resumes does nothing. Face-to-face is the best, of course, because then it's the personality, it's the vibe, it's the whole feeling. Like what you and I are doing right now is so much better because we're looking at each other. I'm getting so much more information from the questions you're asking by looking at you than just hearing you. And of course, when we're in person, we have all these other things that are coming across as communication. And people remember that. So try to get in front of the makeup people, the makeup effects studios, go to these different places, Facebook friend them, Instagram, all of that. I have a makeup artist that I've hired many times before she was union. She would send me tons of things having to do with going through school, and I was very impressed with her work. Suddenly I knew her name, I knew her face, and I knew her work. So when she came out and she got in the union, I said, you're hired. Because now I knew a lot about her, and I knew that she had passion and hunger and drive. Those are 3 things that you're going to hear over and over by people in Hollywood that they look for when hiring. Yes, I assume you can do makeup. I assume you can, if I put a woman in front of you, you're going to be able to make her pretty. Either a no makeup look or a full-on glam look. When it comes to makeup effects, things like that, you should have some basics, but I can train you for that. What I can't train you for is the passion, the hunger, the I'm willing to jump on a grenade for you attitude. And I call it that when it comes to the film business. I call it death by deal memo. And that's unfortunately kind of the way the studio and directors and producers see it. When you sign a deal memo for a film, they own you. Okay? Yes, they love you and they appreciate you and they respect you as an individual human being. But the one commodity that is easily replaced in the film and television business is the crew. Okay? So you've got to do your job. You have to be positive. You want to be hungry for it. You don't want to complain. I've gone into different markets other than LA, secondary markets as I call them. Those are typically markets that have a dozen, 2, 3 dozen makeup and hair people, and they just wait for big shows to come in. They rarely or ever been the department head. They've rarely, if ever, traveled. And they just wait for big shows to come in and be told what to do. Those secondary markets, sometimes I'll go into them and this person will say, well, I get my hair done every Thursday. I need to be out of here by 5. And then I get together with my best friends on Friday night, so I got to get out of here by 6. They give me this laundry list and I'm like, okay, I understand and respect you have a life. But when you purposely get into the film or television business that notoriously works, 14, 15, 16-hour days for makeup and hair, you got to put that on hold for a while, unless it's, if it's an emergency, if it's health, if it's, hey, my tooth is giving me a hard time, no problem, go. Just tell me when you need to go. You're out of here. But the personal stuff, I'm sorry, we have to a little bit sell our soul during that production. Once it's over, then I go back and I'm everybody's best friend and try to become, involved in their lives again. But when I'm on a film, I might as well be on Mars.
I like that. That's a great statement. A few things you said really kind of trigger some ideas of mine. I don't know how much you've run into this, but to me, there's a lot of hobbyists in the film world, and what I mean is they love movies. They think they want to be involved in movies, but they just don't have that level of commitment that they really want to go to Mars for 30 days or 45 days, and those are the people that their personal life is still the most important thing to them during that period versus the job. And I run into that all the time, which is frustrating, but once you find the right people, you just hang on to them and work with them as much as possible. The other thing that you said that I think is so important is the communication and responding to people. I admire that about you. We have a mutual friend who does that and does it so well, and that's Dallas Sonnier. We'll talk about how we both ended up working with him, but one thing I super respect, which has become more and more rare these days, is that he gets back to you. If you email him, he responds to you. And most of the people that have joined his army are in it because they reached out to him, and like I said, we'll talk about both of our experiences doing that, but I think it's an admirable quality and one that all producers and industry professionals should achieve, try to achieve for sure. So I just wanted to commend you of that. One more question about the craft. Actors. Okay. Now we know that, like you said, most actors are great in the makeup trailer. But what are some things that maybe, actors that are just getting involved in the business should be aware about makeup, should be conscious of your team, things not to do, you know what I'm saying? Give actors some advice too to let makeup do their best job.
Right. Well, I have very few pet peeves because I have a very open makeup trailer when it comes to production assistants who are at the bottom of the totem pole. They have no union representation. Everyone can be their boss. Anyone can get them fired. And they have, a lot of times, really shitty jobs. But that's how you get in the business. My own son was a production assistant for years. But my whole career, I've allowed them in if there's room, gotten to know them. Anybody can come in the trailer. On Terror on the Prairie, it was, the makeup and hair trailer was quite the social spot when we weren't working. I would say, hey, we got coffee, we've got this and that. And it was very cold and snowy outside. So it was very social. I allowed dogs in there. That's another pet peeve, a lot of makeup artists, because I'm very dog friendly. I would actually rather have a dog at the base of the makeup chair of an actor I'm working on and have to step around the dog than to not have the dog there at all. That's how much I like dogs. I'd rather be inconvenienced by this dog at your base. And that's happened many, many times. And I'm happier when that's happening. Not all makeup department heads think this way. I'm just a little more open about that. And if I have to, I'll go, hey folks, I'm sorry, we're super busy in here. I got to clear everybody out. And then people listen to you. Don't think, oh, Jeff's an asshole because he does this all the time. This is a rare case. Jeff must be serious. So when it comes to actors having their kids in there, no smoking ever. I'll put a stop to that. I'm not a smoker myself, and I don't think that that's cool whatsoever, so no smoking. Actors and actresses love to be on their phone. They love to eat. They love to do all that. You got to let them do that because they don't have much time. They have to conduct their business. I mean, Arnold, when we were doing Terminator 2, was President's Council on Physical Fitness for George Bush, and he was constantly busy and had people coming and going and had assistants there and all of these different things, and that was fine. We made it work. What am I going to do, say no to Arnold? No, put that phone down. Of course, when actors and actresses are like this with their phone, and you're like, excuse me, we need to see you, you got to give them a little discipline. And I don't mean that in a, like, you bad boy or bad girl. You just, excuse me, I cannot see your face. Could you please lift it up here? Here, hold your phone here. See, we hold it right there. You can look at it, and we can both work. I will not tolerate any disrespect from an actor or an actress towards me or any of my crew, especially my crew. You can tell me I'm an asshole and I'm probably going to agree with you. But if you do that with one of my crew, anybody does that and I get in their face. This is something my grandfather used to do. This is something that I have always done. It's rare that it happens, but if somebody disrespects or treats someone badly, I will call them on it right then and there. And you know, it's easier now that I've been doing this for 40 years. I have a resume that people respect, which, you know, I don't want to ever overstate that, but it's very black and white with me now. There's very little gray area. You know, if somebody does something inappropriate, I'm going to call them on it right then and there, and it's going to be obvious to everyone in the room that that person did something inappropriate. So it's easier for me that way. You know, a few years ago, I was on a film about 13 years ago, and my second on the film, this was a huge film, this was a $220 million film, and my second on the film, an Academy Award winner, I'd known for 20 years, had done probably 14, 15 films with me, easiest going guy in the world, and he took a picture of one of the actors, and you know, his makeup people were taking pictures all the time, and this was because the actor was concerned on how he looked for this particular scene, where he was running down the beach pulling his pants up, okay, from behind. And he took a picture, he showed it to him, and the actor went, "Oh, good, okay, thank you, can you erase that?" And he erased it. Well, then the actor told the director this, the big name director, and the director went, "I can't have people taking pictures like that." He goes, "Well, yeah, but I asked him to take it and then he erased it." He goes, "Yeah, but I can't have people doing that." And he fired this guy, okay? I was department head on this very big, very expensive action film. And I went to the producers and said, "You know what? I will not screw you guys by just stepping away. I will have my department head on second unit come over and take over. But if this person is being let go because of this reason that is not just whatsoever, I can't work for somebody like that. I can work for directors I don't like, but I can't work for directors I don't respect ever again." And I spent the next few days transitioning over, thinking I'm probably going to burn some bridges here, but my gut just said, no, I can't tolerate this. And I went to the director and I told him. He says, "Yeah, but I can't allow that to happen. I had to make a statement." I go, "This was completely unjust." So I left the film and worried that I was going to burn bridges, but I was so transparent and so helpful, and I said, "I don't want to screw you guys with money or time or anything. I'll make sure this is a smooth transition." I figured I'd burn bridges. Well, those producers and production manager have tried to hire me several times since then. So as much as I thought I was going to burn a bridge, I ended up doing the right thing with no experience on how to do that. It's just my gut. And as you know, as you get older, your gut is what guides you. Your brain says go left, but if your gut says go right, you should go right, because your gut has an inner voice that has been learning for the last 63 years in my case, because I'm 63 now. So I listened to my gut. My gut did right by that. But that was inappropriate. That was black and white, and I listened to my gut, and I'm glad I did. My wife was a little pissed off because I walked away from a lot of money, but I'll never regret that. So, you know,
I think that's great.
Yeah, and one more quick thing. You know, I was fortunate to work with Arnold for so many years, and when we were about to start Terminator 3, I had made up these little cards, laminated cards, that had each of the 7 stages that Arnold was going to go through, of how much makeup time it was in the morning, how much for touch-up at lunch, and how much for removal. And Arnold had a deal, doorstep to doorstep, as they call in the business, which means you work 12 hours from the time you leave your house to the time you get back. Doesn't include, you know, travel time is included in there. So if it's an hour to the studio, you know, you leave at 11 in the morning, you start working at noon, you better be at 10 o'clock at night back in the car heading back so that you're home at 11 again. Well, Arnold was making $30 million. That's known for Terminator 3. Everything had Arnold in it. And I had on these cards for some of these stages, he would be in makeup, either removal, taking care of it during lunch, and the application in the morning, for 7 hours. So that left, you know, a few hours, and I thought, oh man, This is going to be, and the studio was like, okay, thank you very much. And we stuck to that. And I went to Arnold and said, Arnold, are you aware you're going to be in the trailer for a long time? Look at these cards. This is what the reality is going to be. He says, Jeff, I'm going to be making a fucking lot of money on this. Don't worry about it. And I thought that was so cool.
So I think, I wanted to say something real quick. Your story about what you did on that film, I think is, again, admirable. And holding on to your principles while you're working in the industry, I think is super important. So often they get compromised. And I had a similar situation this past year where I was up for a directing gig on a movie. And, there was a stipulation that all of a sudden came down the pipe. I don't know if you remember John Mars, who worked on Terror on the Prairie as our armorer. But basically I was told, if I can get this gig, as long as John Mars has nothing to do with the film. And it wasn't for any kind of professional reason. It was just a personal beef by one of the money guys. And I thought about it, and I said, this is a slippery slope. If I say yes to this, who knows what else is coming down the pipe? And I basically said, look, the only reason that we're not hiring John Mars is because he's not the best guy for the job, right? And that's the only reason. So I told him, if that's the case, if we're just going to blackball people, I'm done. I'm not in on this film. So I get what you did.
You don't do it because you want people to pat yourself on the shoulder. You do it because your gut says this is what you have to do. And I didn't know at the time. I thought, and I probably wouldn't have done it 10 years earlier. When you're newer in your career, there's a lot of gray area. And we're all asked whether you're whether you're an armorer or you're a studio teacher or you're an animal wrangler, whatever it is, we're all asked to bend the rules a little bit. And people do to a certain extent. But you have to know, once you go to black and white, you'd better be. My dad once told me something, and I've used this so many times. He said, in the business, you're going to find yourself many times in a room full of very powerful people. And they're going to ask your opinion. And they're going to listen to you. And he said, the best advice I can give you is tell them what you think, just make sure you're right. And here's another example. This is a fun story. I was doing Scorpion King, and Chuck Russell, the director who I'd worked with a couple of times before that, was the director, and we were testing leading ladies. And we had like 6 leading ladies, including Kelly Hu, who ended up being the leading lady and a perfect choice for the casting. And so we would go through the days of doing the makeup and the hair and the wardrobe and putting them in front of camera. Then it was time for us to sit in the theater, just like you see. It's projected. There's the studio heads there. This was Universal. And you've got the director, the producers, studio heads, the money people, myself, the hairstylist, the head wardrobe designer. We're all sitting in there. And we're watching all of these girls, Finally, it's the end. We've watched all of them, and I could see all the heads are over there talking. And finally, the one studio head says, Jeff, come on over here. What do you guys think? What do you and the hair person think about this? And I thought to myself, oh boy, this is gonna be like farting in church, what I say. Because I could see Chuck Russell wanted this one girl who was gorgeous. She was in all these videos. She was, but she had kind of a hard look to her. And I said, guys, to be honest with you, this particular person, let's call her Mary, I have no idea what her name was, she's going to be hard to make look good from every angle, okay? And there are times that I think, and I know the audience to a certain degree will think, that looks like a dude in drag. And the director, Chuck Russell, goes, oh, Jeff, Jesus, great. And all the rest of them said, you're right, including the DP. Came to me afterwards and said, Jeff, thank you so much. She would have been a tough one. When you get her in the right light, she looks gorgeous. It's like Hilary Swank can look like a guy, or she can look like a gorgeous woman, So we didn't hire her. We hired Hilary Swank. And, it was that moment like, oh man, Dad, I'm going to use your advice. I'm going to say what I think, but I don't know if everybody's going to look at me like, you idiot, why are you even on the show? We're trying to make this woman look sexy and beautiful, and you're telling us it looks like a dude. But I was right. I made it up with Chuck Russell later on.
Nice. And you saved the movie, to me.
Even the hairdresser looked at me and went, oh shit, I'm not with him.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about your career, which if we dove into it, it could probably take several hours. So let's hit the highlights. Your first big gig was Terminator, and it was only your second movie as department head. How did you get the job?
I don't know, because a lot of times movies you film a bunch of them in a short period of time, and depending on how much post-production, one could come out sooner than, maybe you just finished it and it comes out 2 months later. The other one you finished 6 months ago comes out a year later. I had done To Live and Die in L.A. with Billy Friedkin, and Billy Friedkin at the time was a god. He had done The Exorcist, he had done The French Connection. A bit crazy, but I got along great with him. Billy and I got along great, and that was a good training for me of the artistic craziness that Hollywood can be. Loved working on that. I did a movie called Violated. I did Terminator. I did several in the non-union world, but with Terminator, I got a call from the hairdresser, Peter Totpal, a Hungarian hairstylist who's now retired. And Peter and I have done 35 films together. He's in many of the photos I sent you. He's the little Hungarian guy. And Peter had worked with Gail Ann Hurd on something. And she had called Peter, and Peter said, hey, you should interview Jeff Dawn. He'd be perfect for this. Because I was non-union, because I had a pretty deep amount of prosthetic experience. Said, okay, you need to go up and meet with Gail Ann Hurd and this guy named James Cameron. And went up to Gail Ann Hurd's house up on Mulholland Drive, met with them, and they said, great, you're going to be our guy. You just need to go meet with Stan Winston, because Stan Winston has final say on whoever's going to be the makeup artist on this show. And I didn't know Stan, but he knew my father very well, and he knew of me, and of course I knew of him. So I went and met with Stan, and we got along great. And Stan said, great, all right, you're the department head. And Stan had said, we're going to do a makeup test on Arnold next week, and we'd like you to be here. Come and just, observe. Oh, great. Well, at the time, Arnold, I was the biggest fan. I was into bodybuilding. I had Arnold posters up. I'd seen all of his movies many times. I'd read his book, Education of a Bodybuilder, many times. I'd go to the gym. Hey, everybody look fantastic today. How's it going? And I would do my bad Arnold impersonation, in the 80s. Or 70s at that point, and everybody would laugh, and I thought maybe someday I'm going to meet Arnold. Well, suddenly I'm going to do this film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was like, oh my God, I was so nervous. So we're at the Stan Winston Studios. A week later, Arnold walks in. I meet him. Stan's guys are there, and Arnold sits down in the chair, and we're going to put meaning I thought they were going to put some prosthetics over his eyebrows to cover his eyebrows to make them look like they were burned off. He sits in the chair, and I've told this story many times, and I don't know if it was set up this way, was by Stan or not, and nobody was touching him. The usual guys that do the application for Stan, and Stan does it occasionally, but Stan was, I thought, having one of his other guys do it, and nobody was touching him. I thought, okay. I just reached over, I grabbed the prosthetic, I started doing it, and I did the makeup. Turned out very well. And Stan called me into his office. I'm like, oh shit. He goes, Jeff, I watched what you did out there. That turned out very well. He said, I didn't know if you were going to be the makeup artist on the show as a department head or if you were going to be part of our team. He said, I want you to be part of our team. So I had hands-on as the number one applicator on all of that. And of course, Stan had the final say. Stan didn't actually do any of the applications. I either did it myself or I did it with one or two of Stan's guys. And, am I thankful to Stan Winston? For doing that, for getting me onto Terminator, for winning an Academy Award, for having 20 years experience with Arnold. I will forever say nothing but great things about Stan Winston. So that, in a way, makes me be, okay, pay it forward. What can I do to help other people with their career? Like Stan did for me. So I will go the rest of my career trying to help people and never even come close to what Stan did for me.
It's incredible. I love that story. You ended up making 19 movies with Arnold. When did you know that it clicked between the two of you and that you were just going to keep doing it? I assume it was a couple movies in, or did you know from the start?
Well, I didn't, keep in mind, I had very little experience. I had only department headed non-union films up to that point. So I didn't know what doing big union films was like. I didn't know what working for somebody else was like. I didn't have much experience, certainly not working with big actors. And Arnold, he wasn't a big actor at the time for the most part. He was an incredibly successful bodybuilder. He had done Conan and the second Conan film, and now he'd done Terminator. So he was still really unknown. Other than in the bodybuilding market. What was it? We got along very well on Terminator. We went motorcycle riding many times. I remember we went horseback riding, Arnold and myself and 3 or 4 other people. In the San Fernando Valley, there's some stables there where you can rent horses. And then later on, Arnold had horses there. And we rented horses and we rode for a few hours. And then we wanted to grab some lunch, so we all went down to the Marie Callender's there in Toluca Lake. And it was busy, and I walked up and I said, it'll be a seat for 6, please, under the name Jeff Dawn. And Arnold goes, Jeff, that name's not going to get us anywhere. Okay, Schwarzenegger. So then we sat down right away. So we got along pretty well in the very beginning. Then I wasn't in the union yet. Arnold went on and did Commando. He started Predator, and they had to shut down Predator because the monster wasn't working out. It just wasn't working. So they shut down for about 6 months. I then got into the union, and Arnold called me to do The Running Man, which is my first union film with Arnold. During that, he said, Jeff, I did this film. At the time, it was called Hunter. They hadn't changed it to Predator yet. I started this film down in the Mexican jungle. We were in Puerto Vallarta, and we got to go back and finish it. We got about half of it to film. I'd like you to be my makeup artist for that. I said, great. So then I did this little unknown film called Predator. I finished the last half of that. And I didn't want to, for the credit on that, I didn't want to take up, Scott Edo did the beginning of it. I didn't want to step in there and go, oh, I'm the department head on this or whatever. So I said, you know what? A cool thing would be to go Mud Makeup by Jeff Dawn, because he has this cool mud on him. So that's my credit on it. I ended up department heading almost half of it, but I ended up getting the mud credit on it, which makes me happy. It stands out. A lot of people say Mud Makeup by Jeff Dawn. So, and then we were off and running. Then, hey, Jeff, I've got this other film. I got Red Heat. I've got this. I got that. And soon I was in his contract. After a few years, I wasn't in his contract anymore because why use that up? Everybody knew I was that. Nobody's going to say, who do you want to do makeup on the show to Arnold. I always look at actors as having so many credits. It doesn't matter if you're just getting started or you're a Bruce Willis or an Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're given so many credits of, all right, for your own trailer, you got to get up 3 credits. For your own makeup person, you got to give up 2 credits. Oh, you want 20 million on it? You got to give up 20 credits. You want some free private jet time to go back and forth between the city we're filming in? That's going to be 10 credits. And you run out of credits. Even an Arnold Schwarzenegger, top of his game, they're going to start saying no to. So you don't want to fill your contract with things that are just obvious. If you're going to get your own makeup person, don't use those credits up on some ink in your contract. Save that for the free jet time or the money or your own trailer or whatever it might be, maybe a producer credit or whatever. So even the most powerful actors are told no quite often. They push the limit until what I call they use up all their credits, until it's like, little drink tickets, okay? Here, you're given 3 drink tickets. Oh, you don't have any more drink tickets? You don't get any more drinks. So it just slowly happened, and then I was the guy. I remember I was called, I'd done 3 of the Star Trek films, and this new show called Next Generation, the TV show of Star Trek, was going to start up. And they said, Jeff, do you want to department head this? And I said, maybe. I didn't want to do TV because keep in mind, back in the 80s and 90s, TV wasn't what it is now. Now it's got Academy Award winners there all the time. It's highly respected, awarded, and appreciated by the world. Where, back in the 70s and 80s, it was a little more like, the redheaded stepchild. No offense to a redheaded man. You don't do that. If you've already reached the top rung on doing big budget features as the department head, you don't go back and do television. But I thought about it, and they said, well, come on in. I came into Paramount. I met with all the producers of it, and they said, great, Jeff, do you want to do this? And I said, yeah. They go, we got to just go and meet with Gene Roddenberry, because Gene Roddenberry was still alive, and he was the executive producer. Well, luckily, I knew Gene because I had worked on Gene for interviews during the Star Trek films. I'd worked on his wife for some of the little pieces that she did, and went into his office with the other producers, and they were all very, intimidated by him. I wasn't, because I already knew him. And he said, congratulations, Jeff, welcome to the show. I went home and I thought, do I want to do television? It was a great gig. I mean, Michael Westmore ended up doing it for a decade or two and making $1 million a year or whatever. And it would have been a great gig. And I went home and I called Arnold and said, Arnold, this is what I'm up against. I really love doing films, but I've got this other opportunity. He said, Jeff, I support you no matter what you do. Just know that I have this movie called Red Heat coming up. We're going to be filming it in Chicago, LA, in Russia, in Budapest, Hungary, in Schladming, Austria. And I went, oh. So I didn't take the TV show, which might have been the best or the worst decision. I was happy with it at the time. And Michael Westmore got it, who's done a fantastic job. But it's always the one that got away, but I think it was the right choice,
That makes sense. I didn't know that story about Predator stopping halfway through. That's really interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
When you're working with an actor that consistently, I'm sure that he ends up trusting you as well, not just at the makeup, but other things, confiding in you and talking about this and that. Can you talk about you and Arnold's dynamic in that way and how it evolved over those 19 movies?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I always give the advice as a department head, because everyone in the film business, makeup and hair, the holy grail is to get attached to an actor or an actress. Oh, I'll get all the money, I won't have to fight for jobs, and I won't have to work that much. I'll show up when they show up, I'll go home when they go home, I'll get guaranteed days, first class travel, all that. I was never that person. I wanted to earn the respect of production and the crew. They saw me in the trenches, they saw me, you saw how I was on Terror. One of the producers on Terror told me, Jeff, when I saw your resume, I thought this is a horrible choice. You don't want to hire this guy. He's going to come in and say, where are my bonbons? Where's my driver? Where's my golf cart? And as you know, I'm not that guy at all. I'm in the trenches helping people with their generators and their horses and anything I can do. So where was I with this? I went off on a tangent. But with Arnold and other actors, learning to be the right person for them. I suggest to people that want to get into helping, to being a star makeup or hair person, don't feed their whims and their interests and all that. I've seen it many times where an actor and actress, suddenly their career starts to go downhill, they clean house. They say, what's the problem here? What's the constant? I'll get rid of my agent, I'll get rid of my manager, I'll get rid of my publicist, I'll get rid of my makeup and hair team. Somebody gets into drugs. If you're supportive of that and they decide to get out of drugs, what do? They're going to get rid of you. Somebody gets into drinking. Hey, Jeff, why don't you come with me? Let's have some drinks. No. Because then when they decide to get off drinking, you're part of it, So none of those things happened with Arnold or The Rock, but I'm aware of it happening with many other actors and actresses. You stay professional, you stay out of their business. If you think that you're like them, it's delusions of grandeur. You're not the same, you're not making $50 million a year, and I always thought it was strange. I would go into a new production and meet the new producers and the new director. "Oh, Mr. Don, we're so happy to have you here. Please take my chair. Can I get you some coffee or anything? What would you like?" "No, I'm perfectly fine, but thank you very much." And what I'm sensing is not respect from my resume or what I've proven to them. I'm sensing fear. These people know that I'm close with a very powerful actor that they're about to do a film with. They don't know that person. They don't want me to go, "That guy's a jerk. That guy's a liar. That guy's a sleazeball." No, they want me to say, "That guy's so nice," or "That woman was so friendly and so honest." So that always bothered me. I understand the dynamics of it, but it just proves the whole falseness and bullshit of Hollywood, where they were kissing my ass out of fear and not because they respected me. I would earn that respect later on, but it was very obvious with those initial meetings. So, but back to actors, I would have times that actors or actresses would talk to me, and I've done this many times with actors and actresses, and I would say, "Stop. What you're telling me right now, I appreciate you wanting to tell me because you're proving that you trust me, and you should. But I can bet that there's half a dozen people in your life that have my, let's say, security clearance. If you're telling me, you're telling those other half a dozen people, and you shouldn't be telling half a dozen people this." I've said that many times to actors, I said, "I do appreciate you, being so open with me because you're showing me that you trust me, as you should." But I mean, even on our own show, Terror on the Prairie, I had Michael, our director, come to me near the end, and he said, "Jeff, I hear you're like the guru to go to." And I went, "What? What are you talking about?" He said, "Many people have told me that they have come to you and asked for advice, and you've given them very good advice, and they feel very safe." Well, that was a huge compliment to me, because I don't talk to people about other things. I do like to give advice. And the thing about advice, it's almost like advice with your own kids. It can't land on deaf ears. There has to be some truth that rings in it for people to listen to you and respect the next word you're going to say. If you come out of left field and tell people something that they're like, "Oh, that was weird, I don't quite get it," then they're not going to be as apt to come to you next time and say something. I'm no expert when it comes to psychology or anything, but I have lived a long life. And as you know, I love to give advice. But it has to ring true, or else the person just glazes over. And it has to come knowing that you're not going to talk to people about it, that this will not become gossip.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I want to ask you about an oddity before we wrap up on Arnold Schwarzenegger, an oddity in his career. Christmas in Connecticut, the only time that Arnold Schwarzenegger directed. What the heck was that like?
Actually, that was wonderful. Arnold had directed a Tales from the Crypt. This was something that a TV show that Joel Silver was head of, and Arnold had a long relationship with the producer Joel Silver that done Commando and Predator and one or two other films. And Joel is a very powerful producer. And Arnold wanted to direct, so he directed that. And then he was given this Christmas in Connecticut. It was very joyful to work on. Arnold was easygoing. He knew what he wanted. He's not a screamer. I remember we were working at this practical 100-year-old home in Pasadena, beautiful old home. And we had some candy glass, the fake glass that breaks up into little shards that don't cut people. You can just take a piece of candy glass and just pulverize it in your fingers. And in the scene, this vase had fallen on the floor, on the wood floor, and was broken. And Arnold walked over and said, "Guys, we need to clean this up right now." And they're like, "Well, it's going to be in the next scene. Then take a picture. I don't want it sitting on the floor. People are going to step on it. It's going to grind into the floor. And if this was my house, I would not like that." I thought, that's great that you think about that, Arnold is still the simple guy that he was. He's more small town Austria. Grew up in Thal, Austria, which is not far out of Graz, in a very small town, no money. Give Arnold some Wiener Schnitzel and a nice German beer, and he's happy. He's still very much attached to his simple days, and I love that about him.
Awesome. I love that story about cleaning that up. It's important as a director to not get so locked into what you're doing that you're not noticing all these other things. You've been in this business for a while. You've worked with so many different directors. You and I have talked about this. How have directors changed? How has the business changed? We talked about how strong directors don't exist as much anymore, and they kind of can't exist as much anymore. So touch on that a little.
Well, there's two very different directors in the television film business. Typically, directors in the film business are the gods of the set. If they want a $10,000 crane the next day, they can get it. They don't have to go to anybody. They have the power, they're the final say. That's what I was used to in my career. And then I started getting into television, and I realized I almost felt sorry for the television directors, because they're brought in to oftentimes a show that's been running for years with a cast that's been very, they're used to a certain way, and they're just running scared. They want to get it done in time. They want to get it on budget. They don't want to piss anybody off, so hopefully they can come back and work on another episode, get another $50,000 to work on that episode, which is typically a typical rate for doing an episodic television show. They work 2 to 3 weeks, prep, location scouting, then they film it. So it's about 3 weeks worth of work for about 50, sometimes 60,000. But they're running scared. And you don't go to them for answers a lot of times. You go to the showrunner, you go to the producer, you go to the money people. I remember when I was doing Hawaii Five-0, we had Peter Weller, from RoboCop. And Peter Weller is not only a genius, he's like 150 IQ, he has his doctorate. He likes to go by doctor. He's a very intelligent, very gift of gab guy. Really has his act together. And we were in a makeup meeting prepping this large makeup show. It was his first one on Hawaii Five-0, about season 2. And I said, I have to ask Peter, our showrunner, that to make sure. And Peter goes, damn it, I'm the director on this. If Peter doesn't like my choices, then he can choose never to hire me again. And I went, yeah, that's the director that I'm used to. Well, Peter Weller ended up doing like 15 episodes for Hawaii Five-0 and for Peter Langkoff, our showrunner. So obviously Peter trusted him. But I love that confidence, that I'm king of the world. You have to be careful now, because the old days of tough love with ADs, I always used to love to work with, I still do, like New York ADs, assistant directors. They're tough, there's no bullshit, this is what I want, give it to me. There's no gray area, okay? Well, that doesn't exist anymore, because 5 people will call when they yell something on the set, and they'll have an HR, incident. I've seen many people get fired through HR. Of course, you can't mistreat people. You can't be touchy, grabby. I always have a ton of females in my department, so I'm this white male, straight makeup boss that has all these females working for me. And I say it's like being locked in a submarine with a bunch of women for several months, because you're in a makeup trailer, you're listening to everything they're saying, and of course there are 2 sets of rules. I can't talk like that. I'm the man. I'm the boss, so I allow that. But you got to be careful. There is no true fairness. I remember in HR, because we would have to have HR meetings at the beginning of every production, every TV series, everything now, and you cannot. You have to treat men and women exactly the same. I said, excuse me, if I am not happy with a particular thing that happened on the set, and let's say I have 5 men working for me, and I take them aside and go, guys, this doesn't work because of this, this, and this. I don't want this to happen again. They'll all go, okay. Nobody's going to call HR. If I do that with the same wording to 5 women, 1 or 2 of them are going to call HR and say, he's mansplaining, or he's talking down to us, or whatever. I said, I can't talk to men and women the same. They said, well, you have to. All right, thank you for that advice. But you've got to be careful. As much as we all want to treat everybody the same in the film business, as a male boss, I cannot treat the women that work for me the same as the men. As much as I'd love to say I can, and I do, I can't. So you've got to be careful. I've never had anything. After Les Moonves, who was head of CBS, was fired because of Me Too, they investigated tons of people. Okay, their department heads, anybody with any power, for the most part, was getting investigated. They investigated me. They investigated me for months. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're talking to all these people. Thinking, oh boy, okay, did I do anything in the 80s or 90s? Because it was a whole different world back then. Luckily, I've never been that grabby, gropey, hey baby, you look pretty hot today kind of guy. It's just not how I was raised. It's not how I talk. So when they finally came back and they said, we look for 9 points of harassment at HR, human resources. And we found 0 harassment in the case of Jeff Dawn. I'm like, oh, thank God. We found him to be a tough boss at times, but we're fine with that at CBS. So, you know, it was nice to hear that because, like I said, I was a product of the 80s, and you know, it was different back then. We all talked differently. The women would talk differently to the men. The men talked differently to the women. We can't do that anymore. It's everyone, especially in any position of power, has to think of it as you're a politician. How will this sound if it's being verbatim spoken back in court? You know, so you have to be very, very careful now. So in that way, and you know, women have and people of ethnicity have been mistreated for years. I totally understand that. I've never been raised prejudiced. I'm not prejudiced. I believe in equal for everybody, but you've got to be extra careful now, because even if you feel super comfortable and you use the wrong words, if it's taken out of context, you're fired. And then you have a ding on you that you said this. So, you know, I remember I did the Me Too, not Me Too, the 23andMe, and I found out that I'm 2% black. Okay, where's this curly hair come from? Okay, I'm 2% black. And I told this to some of the African American crew members on Hawaii Five-0, and they said, "Oh, Jeff, now you can use the N-word." I go, "No, I can't. Of course I can't." You know, they were joking, you know, but yeah, like I'm going to go around using the N-word now and then throw in there, "Oh, it's okay because I'm 2% black." No, you got to be careful. Even in joking around, you got to be careful nowadays because you can get fired.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I kind of, you know, I got into this reading about John Ford, Billy Friedkin, all of these guys, Werner Herzog, and those are my heroes. But the kind of director that I want to be, you got to be careful because tough bosses just aren't respected the way that they used to be. So, you know, it's a fine line. And sometimes I debate about whether I could even survive in the main industry because of the way that I want to work, you know, and which is to treat people well, but to be very direct, confident, you know, and sure of what you want. So let's wrap up. I know it's getting a little bit long here, but let's wrap up talking about working together, how we both came to Terror on the Prairie. So like you, I reached out to Dallas. I emailed him. He got back to me very quickly. You did the same. Where did you hear about Dallas and Daily Wire and all that?
Well, it goes back to, I mean, me politically, personally, I was raised by a Democrat and a Republican, my mother and father. I was always kind of in the middle. A lot of people were in the middle until a few years ago. And over the last few years, I feel that if you're right of center, you're going to get shoved far right because you no longer want to associate with the craziness that's going on in our country on the liberal side. So I started to become a little more conservative, okay, of actually saying to myself and saying to people that were conservatives on sets, you know, hey, yeah, I'm conservative. Let's talk conservative values. Let's talk things going on in the world. And up till a couple of years ago, you would have a handful of conservatives on a film set because Hollywood is traditionally very, very liberal. And we would talk amongst ourselves, but without worry that we're going to get canceled or fired or anything else. Now you feel like, you know, if somebody walks by, you know, oh, those people will blow the whistle on us if they hear us, if they know us, they'll out us. So we're kind of in hiding now, and I can't stand that. Come on, guys. So I started leaning more and more towards wanting to work for a more conservative thinking company. Typically doesn't exist in Hollywood. I was a follower of Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire for the last year and a half, 2 years. Love that show. And don't always agree with everything with them, but generally agree with the concepts of it. And I thought, when I heard that Gina Carano was fired from Mandalorian, and for the reasons that she was fired from, I thought, this is just bullshit, okay? And then Ben Shapiro said, we're going to hire her, and we're going to start filming movies here. I went, oh my gosh, this would be great to be part of the Ben Shapiro group. I kept it in the back of my head. I was going through one of the breakdowns of different films and television shows coming up. There's a few of them that are on the internet. And I saw this Gina Carano film, filming in Montana for the Daily Wire. And I went, oh, and it had a couple of email addresses for both Dallas and Amanda. Dallas, our executive producer, Amanda really the also an executive producer, but just below him. So I emailed them, and I happen to have a copy of it right here, because this is what all started it. It says, hello, producers of the Daily Wire Project. As a loyal conservative follower of Ben Shapiro and all at the Daily Wire, I have been enthusiastic for this project since learning of Gina Carano being let go by Disney. Then learning that the Daily Wire would support her conservative thinking and create a non-woke project for her. If I can be of any help in this film, I'm all yours. As you can see, my qualifications are strong. I included a resume. And then I signed it, thank you, Jeff Dawn, a rare conservative working in the film business. I got a text or an email immediately from Dallas that just said, wow, my producer Amanda is going to call you in a few minutes. And I've never been hired off of a resume and a phone call, but we talked, both Amanda and myself, for the next hour, and she hired me on the spot. And I've told this to many people, it was the most enjoyable project I have ever done. And a lot of that has to do with, it was a throwback to my early days of non-union, everybody helps everybody, it's a wrap, it's getting dark, here, grab an apple box for the grips, you know, can I help you with that? Here, let me carry that for you. You can't do that on $100, $200 million films because it's all unionized, everybody stays in their own little niche. And I loved that part. We all got along brilliantly. It was, Dallas is, of course, not only an incredible producer with 30, 40 producer credits behind his name, but he's an incredibly loyal, very outgoing, personable person. I emailed him one weekend and said, Dallas, I'm a huge fan of documentaries. I've been a screener and a judge for film festivals and for the Academy of Motion Pictures for years. I watch 100, 200 documentaries a year. And I said, what's going on here is an incredible documentary. You've got the behind-the-scene footage. You're doing all these films. You are calling people from all over the world. It's almost, I likened it to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where suddenly all these people show up in, I think it's North Dakota, on this road at night. No one knows each other. They're all looking at each other like, why are we here? Well, they're all called there by the aliens to see these alien ships come in. It was a calling to them. And apparently Dallas had over 3,000 people reach out to him and say, hey, I'm a conservative, I would love to work on this. Is there any way I can do this? And when you ask Dallas, did you return any of those? He goes, all of them. He returned all of those emails. And he hired the few of us, the 60, 70 of us that were there. So that alone is an honor to be part of that. And I had such a great time with it because of Dallas, because of his team. We were more personable, outgoing. It was a film where we did not mask up. It was not a mandatory mask up, a mandatory a vaccine show. I'm personally vaccinated. My family is, but I also believe strongly in it's your choice. Nobody should force me or tell me I'm going to lose my job if I'm not vaccinated. So my crew, many of them were not. And what's so interesting about it, it should have been a super spreader because we were all in these little rooms. It was cold outside. We were all in cars together. We're going to restaurants together. I'm doing makeup. We're doing hair with no masks on. We're doing touch-ups. We're hanging out together the whole time. One person on the whole show had COVID, a production assistant that we were all hanging out around. And he was out for 3 days. Why is it that we didn't all get it? You know, we were in Montana. It was like COVID didn't exist up there. So I'm not saying that this is fake in any way, because obviously hundreds of thousands of people are dying because of COVID, but I'm positive that the whole fear thing is just ramped up to the max when it doesn't need to be. You know, in Montana, there was so few people ever wearing masks. It's like COVID didn't exist, and it wasn't a big deal. And another thing that's so interesting is I have some relatives here in Portland. I live in Portland because my kids live here. I moved to Oregon about 30 years ago, to Bend, Oregon, a small little western town, because I wanted to get away from the LA life, and I didn't want to raise my son there, which was the right thing to do. And then I moved to Portland about 10 years ago because my kids are here. But these relatives said, Jeff, you just came back from that conservative show, and they're liberal. Did you find them to be a bunch of bigots? Did you find them to be a bunch of racists? I laughed and I said, I've never been on a show that's less racist than that was. We had a ton of ethnicity across the board. We had a black first assistant director. I had a black hairstylist. We had Hispanic. We had Asian. We had Native Americans. And nobody made a big deal out of it. It wasn't because of some lottery or some requirement or some mandate that you have to cross off saying we have this many people. It was never a big deal whatsoever, and it worked out great. So, you know, my whole attitude towards this conservative filming business is we need to make a documentary. And Dallas agrees. He said once he gets a few a few films through the Daily Wire, through this production company, he may very well put together a documentary on it. And I would love that, because there's some lessons to be learned by the whole world here, not just conservatives, but how well we got along, how well the film worked, how well, hopefully how well it turns out. And to this date, I've department headed over 40 films, many of them in the $100 to $200 million range. Okay, I haven't done a film of this small budget for 35 years. It's the most enjoyable, most emotionally satisfying project I have ever done. So thank you, Dallas.
I love that.
I mean, you can agree. You know what I'm saying, But I can also, people like to hear it from me because they know I've done those big films. They know I've done the big Hollywood machine. How is this different, Jeff? Well, it's different in a lot of great ways. The camaraderie. I got to know a little bit about every single person on that set. If somebody said, what about that person? Oh yeah, they're married with 2 kids, this is their first job in the film business, and they live in Bozeman. I mean, I could tell you a little bit about everybody because I was truly passionate about learning about them and hearing about them, and I can hardly wait till the next one. If Dallas finds like I said, I have some strong skills, because he looked at the resume and went, oh, damn, okay, Jeff does have some skills here. If I can be of help on the next one or the next 10, I'm happy to do it.
Awesome, man.
And work with you too, of course.
Yes.
You and I clicked very much from day one.
Yeah,
from day one. And I gotta say, oh, sorry, Travis. I gotta say, I didn't know. I'm gonna make you embarrassed right now. Okay, I didn't know what a filming machine you were. I didn't know about the 12. I didn't know about the book. I didn't know about the podcasts and the emails and all of that stuff. You are constantly busy every waking moment, creating or preparing to create or finalizing something you've ever shot or publicizing it or getting it released. I can't believe it. You're a walking single-person studio. And I have mad respect for you now. I mean, we got to know each other as friends on a very light side, but you seem to know a lot about me. I wasn't the type, as you know, that says, okay, then I did this and then I did this. I would answer questions when people came up with the questions, and you certainly had a lot of questions. But I feel badly that I didn't realize what a machine you are in the film business, and I have mad respect for you. Next time I see you, I'll make sure that when I'm sitting and you're sitting, that I'm a little lower, a little bit lower than you, that when we shake hands, I kind of bow a little bit. See, I told you I was going to embarrass you, but seriously, it all sounds like bullshit, but you know me. I have just mad respect for what you, because it's all choices. What we do and what we become in this business. I tell people, watch your reputation. I said at the end of your career, you're going to look up and you're going to see hopefully a wall of DVDs of all the projects you've done. The one thing that you can destroy any day in this business is your reputation. And it gets harder and harder to keep a strong, positive reputation the longer you're in the business. Okay, so you have done some pretty amazing things to keep that reputation strong. and to keep that respect. So, all right, I've done enough kissing your ass. Remember, that's $100.
Exactly.
We agreed on $100.
I will pay you, unlike some people. We won't get into that story this time. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your kind words. It means a lot, especially from you. I wanted to say a few things on what you were saying. It's interesting. We made those 12 Westerns, and not a single person was infected with COVID during the making of those 12 Westerns on our set. And that's 12 feature films in a row. And again, like you said, it's a real disease, but and I'm just stating facts. I'm not stating, I'm not,
It should have been a super spreader event, each one of those, when you think about it. And not to put down, the validity of how dangerous this can be. Because I can see people coming back, I lost my uncle and my best friend and this, that, and the other. This is happening. I've lost people that I know, and it's tragic. But the fear ramp up is way beyond what it should be,
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say, what I think is so cool about what Dallas is doing is, yes, it provides an opportunity for people with conservative leanings to be involved with something where they feel safe, right? But the cool thing is that there's people with all kinds of beliefs, not just different skin colors, but all kinds of beliefs that were involved with what we were doing. And it didn't matter whether they were moderate or liberal. We all came together. I always tell Dallas, to me, it's not about being conservative. It's about being a free thinker. And that's where that's what is really being created there, is free thinking cinema,
Well, yes. I mean, it's an art form. Isn't that books, poetry, music, films, these are the things that should be the freest. If it ruffles your feather, then don't read that book. Don't watch that comedy. Don't watch George Carlin if it bugs you, or Louis C.K. or whoever. It's a free choice. Give us that free choice back, and don't cancel us. We, as in conservatives, are on the side of not believing in cancel culture. I will tell you exactly what I think, whether you like it or not. You can choose to either use it, tell me that I'm full of shit, or never listen to me again. Not push a button and have me canceled. Come on, this is America. So,
amen to that.
Freedom. Let's keep that freedom going. I never thought I was going to be. I'm not a right winger. Okay, I still have a lot of liberal thoughts, but I definitely am a much stronger conservative now than I am a liberal, because I'm still in the middle. I'm just a little farther right on the middle now, and standing with the people over here now instead of stepping into that pool once in a while.
We're getting pushed further that way, I think. At least I feel that way.
We are. And, well, we're not the only ones. Look at the people in the middle are all coming over. I mean, right now, I just heard on NPR, which is typically a very liberal publication, but I still listen to it quite often, that for the first time in decades, there are more people saying that the Republican viewpoint is preferable to the liberal. My God, this is NPR saying this. And of course, we see it in the polls. We see it in how many people in the middle are coming over to the right, how many Hispanics are now leaning towards the right, how many people of color across the board. So, and it's not necessarily how much we're doing everything right, although we have to be very careful that we don't say things that are screwy and crazy. That the left is doing things that are screwing up. I mean, look at the, what did I hear today? I read that the left, of course, people are, as Ron DeSantis says, they're voting with their feet. They're leaving the states and moving to, other states. It's a leftugee. That was the term I heard today. A leftugee, not a refugee, but a left-thinking person that is a refugee of their liberal state. I love that term.
That is funny.
A leftugee.
I hadn't heard that.
Yes.
Heard it first from you. Well, I want to wrap this up with a quick story. I don't know if you remember this, but it was during the first week, I think, of filming on Terror on the Prairie, which I'll be talking more about as we do these, and maybe I'll have you on again in the future after we've seen the movie and we can share more about it, because right now we can't talk a whole lot. But during the first week, you and I had interacted a little bit, but we were in a warming tent trying to stay warm with those heaters, in all of this cold weather. And all of a sudden, I was talking about Paul Verhoeven's Crusades movie that Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to make in the 90s and sadly never did. And you looked at me and said, "You know a lot about movies. I thought you were just a cowboy." And I just want you to know that moment right there, to me, is the beginning of the friendship between Travis Mills and Jeff Dahn.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, and I don't know. I might have said just a cowboy. I try not to say that word, because it means you can say, "I thought you were just the president," but just by saying "just," it puts the person under defense. But I did think of you as, because the way you dressed, you were hanging out with a guns guy, of course, all the cowboys, and God, I love those cowboys. What it is it's a lifestyle. And it's the reason I moved from LA up to Bend, because I'm a simple person that I'd rather hang out with the grips and the electricians, the drivers, the special effects, the animal wranglers, the cowboys, the wrangler, all those people, and have beers in some little Western honky-tonk than go to some fancy place. I've done that. That's crossed that off my list. I'm happy to have flown on so many, private jets and gone to all these places for publicity junkets and tours and all that. I never needed it. I don't need it ever again. I'm not ashamed of it, but it's not who I am. When I got to know the Wranglers, the whole family, the Schultz family from Terror on the Prairie, I immediately clicked with them because they represent a simple lifestyle that I totally can get behind. Love for family, country, God, patriotism. Keep it simple. You're accountable for your actions. Work hard, either succeed or fail, and then don't blame others for it if you fail. That whole lifestyle and philosophy of Wranglers in most of America is what I resonate with, okay? Keep it simple, and I just love those guys, and they knew it. They knew it. They could sense it. It wasn't me just kissing their ass. It was me genuinely respecting who they were and the choice that they made, because it was a whole family. And I love those, the whole Western world. Look at Westerns right now. Look at Yellowstone and all of these different things. It's the #1 show right now on, is it HBO or Showtime?
Paramount, actually.
It's through Paramount. It's through Paramount, yeah. But I think it's a cable show that they say is #1 right now, and I love it. I'm all caught up with it, and it's creating a whole new genre of clothing. Just like Mad Men did with the cool 60s stuff. It's creating a lifestyle. It's going back to the good old days. We're going to see more Westerns. We're going to see more of that simple, good choices in life. And, less of the woke bullshit. Woke is a joke. I'll be the first one to say it. Even the people that use the woke term now are saying, "Oh, we don't use that anymore. That's so yesterday." Well, I'm sorry. When it came to defund the police and woke this and woke that, you guys own it. You got to own it for the rest of your life now, So let's get away from woke. Let's get away from all that bullshit and go back to simple values. Yes, let's treat our men, our women, our ethnicities better than we have. Let's continue that as we have over the last few decades. But let's not let that run the planet. We have 13% in America African American. We have 19% brown people, including Hispanics. We have 6% Asian and approximately 61% white. All right? Let's have our products, our hiring, our commercials, our movies represent those proportions and not an exaggerated proportion based off of who is the biggest complainer in the room. Okay? The local minority should not control the horse, Let's get back to being fair, because if you have a scene with 10 actors and 6 of them are black, you're not representing the other ethnicities. You're not giving the fairness to the 19% Hispanic or the 6% Asian. Not that every product should be based on that, but let's have a little more fairness across them. I'm not talking about white people. I can fight all my own battles. I don't need the woke mob or anybody else fighting for me. I see it as not fair to everyone except for whoever is the most vocal complainer during that particular time. You know? How could that not be fair to think that way?
I think what you said is a good note to end on. Get away from woke and back to Westerns, right? And that's what I make, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully we'll make more of
I can see the shirt now.
Exactly. Make Westerns great again.
Yeah.
So, Jeff,
I'm good.
I want to say that, hopefully the next time I'm making one of my own movies, which probably won't be this year, but hopefully next year, you'll be my makeup artist, my makeup department head. I want to work with you. Hopefully we can make it happen. If not, I think we're going to see each other on some other sets in the near future. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this, for kicking off my new podcast in such an epic way. You're a legend. So be well, sir, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Legend in my own mind. Thank you very much, Travis. And I guess the final words I'll say is, let's go, Brandon.
Of course you would.
Well, that's it for my interview with the great Jeff Dawn. I want to thank him for taking the time to share his experiences with all of us. Next episode, I'll have an interview with another legend in the movie business, stunt coordinator Brian Christensen. Stay tuned for that, and don't forget to subscribe to Making Westerns with Travis Mills.